I think the new Star Wars film is going to be amazing. I genuinely have really high hopes for this one and the rest of the trilogy as well. I'm saying this before the movie comes out, partly so that when I'm right and it is really good, I can say, ha, I told you so, and I'm down in history for being right because my face is on YouTube saying so. I'll admit that that is part of this. But before we get to Star Wars, let's talk about Monet for a bit. There's this great BBC show called Fake or Fortune, and it's a bunch of art curators and experts and historians going through and finding these old paintings that some people think are legit, and they try to decide whether or not it's fake or fortune. So if it's a genuine, undiscovered piece of work by a famous artist, or if it's a copy, a forgery, a bad impression. And episode 1 had this painting that was supposedly by Monet. They pretty much proved beyond a doubt that it was a genuine Monet piece. I say pretty much because in these things you can never 100% prove what you're setting out to show, and when you get that close, you have to simply accept that it is, because there's no way you're going to find enough proof that it isn't. That's just the way that history works. You're never going to have every single gap filled in for any one story or anything that happened in past events. But they pretty much fill in every single gap of this painting story. Argenteuil was a town where Claude Monet lived from 1871 to 1878. They can trace back to the art supplier that Monet bought the canvas off of. They have his books, not for this particular canvas, but to show that there was regular business between these two people, this art supplier Latouche and this artist Claude Monet. They were able to narrow down when that canvas was likely to have been bought, because Latouche's stamp, which was on the back of the canvas, was also found on another work by another artist, and that particular painting was from 1875. A whole stack of experts on Monet and just art history generally were brought in and invited to have a look at this painting, and in the words of one of them, leading scholars are all convinced that it's a perfectly genuine painting. And yet, despite this, there's one guy that they need the okay from in order for the painting to have any sort of commercial value. Since 1974, the people with the last word on the commercial resale value of Monet works have been this Wildenstein family. It's a bit of a dynasty. It was started by Daniel Wildenstein, and now it's run by his son, G. Wildenstein. In Daniel's lifetime, he was shown on the banks of the Seine in Argenteuil, and he disclaimed it as a forgery. And they brought all this new information they'd found and brought it to his son, G. Wildenstein, who's now in charge, and he disclaimed it. His fundamental reasoning was this: Banks of the Seine in Argenteuil is too dissimilar from other works that Monet has done. It is therefore a copy. But if you ask me, that logic is backwards. If you're doing a copy of a famous artist, are you going to do something new that he had never done before? Or are you going to stick to the kind of typical well-known techniques and styles and colour choices and whatever else it is that that artist is known for? I personally would do that because you're more likely to get away with it. Only Monet himself would explore new territory, try new things, kind of push the boundaries of what his art style is like. So how does this apply to Star Wars? Well, only George Lucas himself can tread new ground and explore new techniques and try new things. Now that we're onto the sequel trilogy and it's no longer George Lucas involved and he's passed the franchise on, I think we'll be finding ourselves returning to the roots of the original trilogy. I think the filmmaking techniques will be very similar, the characters and the styles, just visually, it'll be very similar. You can see that from the trailers. But I think just the essence of the films and just the quality filmmaking will hark back to the original 70s and 80s films. Because just as a person doing a forgery of a Monet painting wouldn't explore new things, but is more likely to stick to what is known about Monet's techniques so that they can get away with their forgery better. Not to say that the new Star Wars is a forgery, but I think the same concept applies. They're going to be over here just delivering quality films in the style of those 70s and 80s films that we fell in love with in the first place. And I think maybe people didn't like the Star Wars prequels as much as they could have or should have, or whatever you want to debate, because it was George himself expanding his universe. And I don't know if that makes very much sense. It does in my head. But I reckon this new Star Wars film is going to come out, and I am going to get to say, I told you so. Because I genuinely think it's going to be great. Another great thing is friends who are willing to go around and be a tourist with you and put up with you filming everything, everywhere, all the time. It was a good day. It'll just also be a really good day when the new Star Wars comes out and I get to say I told you so. Okay. Enough depth and thought and classic uni student overthinking things.